Hi, everybody. Today we're going to talk about time management, right? That's like the $1 million term. I got to be better at managing my time. And it's difficult for sure. I think the easiest way to get published is if you publish a new idea on time management. You go to the library and there's rows and rows of books on time management strategies. But I think it all boils down to this, right? It's just making a plan. So planning your work and then working your plan. And so if you look at that kind of comment, planning the work is easy, right? That's the easy part. But actually putting your plan into action, that's the tough part. And there's no magic strategy for it. You just got to be willing to make the commitment and do it. So we're going to continue throughout this course to talk about two main plans as far as academics go, as far as school. The semester plan, right? Taking a look, first week of school, get all your syllabus together and make a plan, right? Look and plan 15 weeks into the future. Mark things that are important to you, right? If you need to make a trip home for a birthday or a friend or something, know when that's happening. Look at the syllabus, find out when your exams are, when your major papers are due, when spring break is, because quite often the week after spring break is a pretty busy week, academically speaking, on campus. So if you don't know that you have a couple of exams and you get back from a great spring break and then you go, oh crap, I got to study. That's not quite planning as well as we want to. The second style is a weekly plan. And that's really what we're going to do with our time during the week. And that's something that should be reevaluated a little bit each week and modified depending on what you've got going on. One big note is that there's only 165 hours in a week, right? 24 hours a day times 7 is 168. And so this idea that we can manage time is actually false, right? We cannot manage time. Time goes by at a constant rate no matter what we're doing. And so the term time management is a little deceiving. What we can actually do is manage ourselves and manage how we use that time. So that's an important concept. When we're talking about managing ourselves, we have to identify what our roles are in life, right? So I want you to take a second and think about what your life roles might be. I've listed up there some examples, right? So you're either a son or a daughter to parents. That's a life role. For some people, it might be a more major life role than others. All of these are individual and they're up to you. Some people might be a parent, right? That's a life role. Being a student is a life role. An employee, a volunteer, a friend, a partner, right? If you're in a relationship. A member of a club or an RSO. Some people might be a soldier or in ROTC. And then my fun example that I put up there, I grew up in Michigan. I'm a Detroit Lions fan. It's a life role of mine. Now, is it a huge, major life role of mine? No, probably not. I mean, it takes up 3 hours every Sunday in the fall to watch the game. And so when we're looking at these, identify yours, and that's part of the assignment for this module, is to identify your life roles. So think about the things that you spend time on. So if you like to play video games, being a video gamer is a life role. If you've got a part-time job, you work at the Book and Bean on campus, or if you work in Washakie 12 hours a week, that's a life role. You're an employee. So one thing that everybody in this class has in common is the life role of being a student. Right? You're all enrolled in school, you're a student. And so when we look at our life roles, we can kind of prioritize them and say which ones are more important to us. And definitely, again, like my Detroit Lions fan example, being a Lions fan does not trump being an employee, right? I put my job first. I put my family first, things like that, and that's how I kind of decide how I'm going to use my 168 hours. So check it out. Make your list of life roles, and I'll be excited to read about the things that you guys have going on in your lives. Right. So how we manage our time depends on how we prioritize those roles. So if being a video gamer is one of my life roles, if I'm spending 40 hours a week playing video games and only 20 hours a week doing my schoolwork, even though I might say, oh, being a student's important, it's not clear that is more important than being a video gamer with how I'm spending my time. So here's one of the important concepts of this module, and you'll read more about it in the reading Acting on Purpose. The self-help author Stephen Covey, he wrote 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, hugely successful book, a lot of spin-offs. He came up with this 4-quadrant system, where quadrant 1 are things that are urgent and important. Quadrant 2 are non-urgent and important, right? So the top row is all important. The bottom row is all important. Quadrant 3, urgent but unimportant. Quadrant 4, non-urgent and unimportant. So if we look at those and see if you can think of any examples of something that might fit into quadrant 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. And I even put up there in quadrant 4 the time wasters. Right, and so that's what quadrant 4 is, right? It's not urgent and it's not important. And when we're talking about importance, we're talking about relative to your goals. And so that's an important thing to remember when you're looking at this stuff. So I put up at the top, learning to say no. That's a difficult thing, right? If a friend comes and says, hey, let's go over and hang out here, that seems pretty nice, and it's really tough to say no to a friend that way. But if you need to be studying for an exam or something like that, that can really mess you up. So if we're looking at this stuff, maybe an example of quadrant 1, something that's urgent and important. Let's say you have a paper that's due tomorrow, and you haven't started writing it. That's urgent and it's important, so you got to get going. Quadrant 2, right? So let's say that paper's due Friday, and you start writing it maybe the previous week, right? You write a draft, then you go to the writing center, and you're doing all this stuff days and days before it's due. It's important because you want to get a good grade to do well in the English class, but it's not urgent, not yet. And then if we look quadrant 3, and in the reading there's a couple more examples of this, but quadrant 3 is a little tricky, right? Something that's urgent but it's unimportant. And so those might be things like I had a student in class the other semester who said the new iPhone's coming out, right? So he was going to stop everything that he was doing and go and get it. And so it was urgent because it was being released right then and there, but it wasn't important, not to his goals, right? And so that I thought that was a good example. Another good example is something that might be important to somebody else. And that we get faced with quite a bit. If a friend calls you and they've got a situation where maybe they need you to talk to them right then and there. And especially in this day and age where we've got our phones on us and we can be accessible 24/7. Let's say you're trying to get your paper written, but a friend calls and they want to talk. It's important to the friend and it's urgent, but it's not quite important for you. That English paper is important for you. And then quadrant 4 tends to be the fun quadrant, right? Like Netflix. Netflix is in there. Hanging out, doing social media, just sitting and Snapchatting, stuff like that. Those are time wasters. Watching a season of a show on Netflix is not urgent at all, and it's not important to your goals. So that's kind of the quadrant system. That stuff will come up on the quiz. It's important to know. We'll talk a lot about how do we stay in quadrant 2. Stephen Covey's whole concept is if you can spend more time in quadrant 2, quadrant 1 stuff's always going to come up, right? There's always stuff that you don't anticipate. So there's always going to be that stress, always quadrant 1. But if you spend enough time in quadrant 2, you'll have the time to deal with quadrant 1. And he says no time should be spent in quadrant 3 or 4. And I also put learning to say no, I think, is an important thing. So those are the quadrants, Stephen Covey's quadrants. So we want to talk about making some rules. Think about last semester. Think about how it went. And right now, on a sheet of paper, write down 3 rules for yourself for college success. So hopefully you have a couple jotted down. If you don't, maybe pause the video, finish up your thoughts. So I've got a few rules that I know helped me. Like I think I've said a couple of times, I didn't do very well my first semester in college, and I had to think about it. And ever since then I've been thinking about these. And so these are rules that are good for me. Your rules might be different, but these ones certainly helped me. Number 1, pretty shocking, right? Go to class. That's huge. If you're not in class, you don't get the information, and it's expected of you to be there. Plus, you're paying for it. Number 2 for me was sit in front. That was important for me for a couple of different reasons. One, I found my eyesight wasn't as good as it had been, and so I couldn't see the board as good as well. But most importantly for me, if I sat in the front, I knew that the instructor saw me. I made eye contact with them. And so that would help me with my number 1 rule in going to class, because I knew if I wouldn't show up, they would know I wasn't there. And that was important to me. I didn't want to let them down. And then number 3, introduce yourself to your instructor, right? Have meaningful face-to-face contact and discussion about the course. This does a couple of things. It lets the instructor know who you are and that you're invested in the course, right? That you actually care about it. Then they're going to know your name, and it's going to be a lot easier for you to go up and ask questions later. And they might reach out to you later and say, hey, you're missing this. Come and see me. Let's talk about it. So those were my 3 rules. I found that those really, really helped me. And so I'm excited to see what you guys come up with as rules for you. So just a brief little thing about goals. There's lots of acronyms as far as goals go. I like to talk about SMART goals, and so I put what the acronym is up there on the screen. And it's important for a goal to have all of those pieces. So if I just say my goal is to do better this semester, not very specific. Sure, it might be measurable. You say, okay, well, did I do better than last semester? Is it achievable? Maybe. Realistic? Yeah, probably. Timely? But it could be much more specific, right? So you say, by the end of this semester, I hope to have this GPA. And so then it has everything there. And so start to think not only academic goals, but start to think beyond that. I think is a really important thing. As we get into some of the later modules, you'll see how everything ties together. If I'm a member of a club and I'm really committed to that club, that's going to actually help my academics. It's going to help everything together. Especially when we can really get excited about something, it can really help with our motivation.